So at this point, we're going to look at photosynthesis in more detail. The photosynthesis, remember, is a series of chemical reactions. So that first stage captures and transfers energy, and we refer to those as the light-dependent reactions. They include groups of molecules called photosystems. So remember, they take place in the thylakoid membranes. So we start with photosystem 2. Photosystem 2 is what actually captures and transfers the energy from the sunlight. So this is where chlorophyll absorbs energy. The energized electrons are then going to enter the transport chain, which will split water molecules, and then oxygen is released as waste. As the energized electrons move along the transport chain, hydrogen ions are then transported across the thylakoid membrane against their concentration gradient. So when we look at how that works, sunlight's absorbed, water molecules are broken down, oxygen's released, electrons go in. As those energized electrons move from protein carrier to protein carrier, hydrogen ions get pumped to the inside of that thylakoid membrane. Okay, so that's photosystem 2. Photosystem 1 then captures that energy and produces energy-carrying molecules. So the chlorophyll again absorbs that energy from the sunlight, and those energized electrons moving along the membrane are used to make an energy-carrying molecule called NADPH. Really long chemical name, you don't need to know it, not at this level. NADPH then is transferred to those light-independent reactions, what we called stage 2 of photosynthesis. So now we've got those electrons coming along, moving along those carrier proteins, which are not shown actually in this picture, and they're used to create that energy-carrying molecule NADPH. Okay, so NADPH later gets transferred to the light-independent reactions. We don't see that here. But then we still have all of these hydrogen ions in excess here. Remember, they're at a high concentration, so they want to move to where they've got an area of low concentration. So the light-dependent reactions are what actually produce ATP. So step 6 on that previous picture, I don't have it on my screen, shows that the hydrogen ions actually flow through a channel in the thylakoid membrane. During that time, the enzyme ATP synthase, we know it's an enzyme because it ends in ASE, attaches to the channel to make ATP. And this is just a diagram of what ATP actually looks like. Now, the second stage of photosynthesis uses energy from the first stage to actually make the sugars. So this is the whole reason ATP gets made. So now we're looking at the light-independent reactions. Remember that these occur in the stroma, in that fluid in the chloroplast, and uses carbon dioxide molecules, 6 of them if you recall. So a molecule of glucose is formed as it stores some of the energy captured from sunlight. So as these carbon dioxide molecules enter the chloroplast, they enter into what's called the Calvin cycle. So as you can see in your picture, it's actually a cycle. It goes in a circle. So energy here is added and carbon molecules are then rearranged. And then a high energy 3-carbon molecule leaves the cycle. So let me explain that looking at the picture. As we've got carbon dioxide entering, okay, it enters the Calvin cycle, and you don't have to know all of these different molecules that are involved, but all you have to do is look at the number of carbons that are present. See here, this is a 6-carbon molecule. ATP is used, my mouse keeps going to sleep, ATP is used, broken down and releasing that energy. So is NADPH, and in doing so, releasing electrons. What that does is it enables that 6-carbon molecule to be broken in half. So we actually get 2 of these 3-carbon compounds. So as the 3-carbon compound moves further in the Calvin cycle, one of them leaves the cycle, and the molecules are rearranged to form the molecule of glucose. So we've got a 3-carbon molecule that kind of comes back, that stays in the cycle, and then ATP releases energy to form that 6-carbon molecule so that we can go back here again. So a molecule of glucose is formed as it stores some of the energy captured from sunlight. So 2 3-carbon molecules bond right over here in order to form that molecule of glucose. The remaining molecules actually stay in the cycle. So our key concept for this video is that the overall process of photosynthesis produces sugars that store chemical energy. So we know that producers make their own source of chemical energy. Plants use photosynthesis to do that, and so therefore they are producers. Photosynthesis itself captures energy from sunlight to make sugars. So any time you eat any vegetables, anything that comes from plant material, you are taking in sugars or carbohydrates. Now, inside a plant, there is a chemical compound called chlorophyll, and that chlorophyll is the molecule that absorbs the sunlight energy. In plants, it's inside those chloroplasts, inside internal structures that we're going to look at here in just a second. So the photosynthesis itself takes place in 2 parts of the chloroplast. The first part is called the grana, or the thylakoids, and the second part is called the stroma. Well, what's the difference, Mrs. Learned? I know some people had some issues looking at their vocabulary and couldn't find the word grana. Grana is plural for the word granum, G-R-A-N-U-M. When I look internal to this chloroplast, I can see that the granum, singular, is a stack of these green discs called thylakoids. Okay? They are surrounded by a fluid, and that fluid here is called the stroma. Now, we're going to look first at what we call the light-dependent reactions. These light-dependent reactions are what actually capture energy from the sunlight. It takes place in the thylakoids and would not occur unless sunlight is present, as well as water. Chlorophyll absorbs that sunlight energy and transfers it along the thylakoid membrane, then to what we call the light-independent reactions. And at that point, oxygen is released. So when we look at this light-dependent reaction, we can see here that the sunlight is entering the chloroplast, water is present, so the thylakoid absorbs that water and sunlight, transfers the energy, molecules are transferred. We can see something going on here that we can't see in this image, but then oxygen is released. So the light-independent reactions, the reactions that don't require sunlight, are the ones that actually make the sugar. So this is kind of part 2 or stage 2. These take place in the stroma. They need carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They use the carbon in order to make the glucose. And if glucose is C6H12O6, they would actually need 6 carbon dioxides to make a single molecule of glucose. So that energy is used to build a sugar in a cycle of chemical reactions. So here's the rest of our orange arrow coming in from the top, but those 6 carbon dioxides entering into the chloroplast go through a series of chemical reactions in order to produce that 1 molecule of glucose. So the equation for the overall process is 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water in the presence of sunlight yields 1 molecule of glucose and 6 molecules of oxygen.